Running a 24-hour neighborhood ER has its ups and downs. The downs usually occur at 3:30 in the damn morning when we got a skeleton crew and homeless people start flocking to our doors in search of shelter. Typically, we try to handle them ourselves, give them a little food and water, and then call whoever is on duty at the precinct to escort them down to the actual shelter on the corner of 13th and 7 Elms. When I spotted a strange, disheveled man wandering outside the ambulance bay, I really thought it was going to be that simple. He looked lost, confused, and perhaps a bit shaken, so my first instinct was to step out and guide him to the lobby. He was at first shocked by my kindness and tried to mouth his thanks. I did a quick check on his vital signs and determined that the man must have had a stroke. "Meg, run an EKG on our friend here while I warm up some coffee for him," I told my nurse. She nodded and ran off to take care of it while I checked him for any other injuries. There appeared to be a few strange bruises on his left arm and back, and I motioned towards them, but the man was too scared to say a word. 15 minutes later, we finished the EKG test and confirmed that he had a minor stroke. Using FAST, the EKG revealed nothing else of danger for him. "I think you're going to be all right," I told him as he slowly ate the food. All the while, he kept looking out into the empty streets beyond our building, as though he was expecting something. Well, Meg had gotten a hold of Officer Dillon to come pick up our friend, and I made sure to also provide him a few prescriptions for the trip to get him back to normal. I figured that would be the end of our story. But 19 minutes after Dillon had taken our friend to the shelter, I saw him wandering out again in the bay, looking equally lost as he had before. "Hey, what are you doing back here? Did Dillon not take you the whole way?" I asked him. The man seemed confused. He didn't understand what we were talking about. I escorted him inside and told Meg to watch him while I called the precinct. A dispatcher named Joy answered the phone, but she didn't live up to her name. "What is it, Doc? I'm busy playing an online game of bridge and winning big." "Sorry to bother you, but I was checking to see if Dillon was back from the shelter yet," I said as I looked back towards the homeless man that had returned to us. "No, not yet, but I'll give you a ring if he does," Joy said. Meg was walking up to me, looking concerned as she muttered, "Doctor, I don't think this is the same man." "What makes you say a crazy thing like that?" I asked. She gestured toward the small of his back where there was a tattoo marking that looked rather fresh, in the shape of a V. And she muttered, "When he was here earlier, he didn't have a mark like that." I ignored the oddity and assumed that he must not have noticed it the first time. I reassured the man he would get to the shelter soon. Joy called back around 4 a.m. "Doc, have you heard from Dillon?" "What? You mean he never returned to the precinct?" I asked. "No, and I called his radio. Nothing. I can't even pick up a signal from his patrol car. What's going on at your end?" she asked. I looked back towards the stranger that was pacing in my ER nervously. "It's hard to explain, but something might have happened to Dillon. Is anyone else on duty tonight?" "Well, Rachel is, but she's handling a domestic dispute. Probably be a minute before she can get to you," Joy said. At the exact moment she was talking, I saw, staring at something just beyond the glass. It looked like someone was running down the highway towards the interstate. "Is everything all right, Doc? Why'd you call anyway?" Joy asked. I wasn't listening, though. I was convinced this strange jogger was going to get struck by a car. Less than a few seconds later, it happened. The bystander went flying in the air as the truck struggled to brake. "Joy, I'll call you back," I shouted. At that same moment, I told Meg to wake up our 2 paramedics and get a move on. I wasn't paying much attention to the homeless man anymore, and when I did look to check on him about 20 minutes later, he was gone. "He must have left," Meg realized as the ambulance returned. "Multiple broken bones and severe hemorrhaging from the lower abdomen along with torn ligaments in the leg," one paramedic said as they moved the jogger out of the vehicle into the ER. I froze as I looked down and saw the same man again, but this time with scars all across his belly and left arm. "How the—" I muttered as they wheeled him past me. It just couldn't be possible, I thought, as I walked back to the main lobby and stared at the street to try to comprehend what was happening. "Doc, we need you here," one paramedic proclaimed. I ran to his side to try to open the airway of the homeless man, but it was pointless. The impact had been severe enough to crush his lungs, and he couldn't breathe on his own any longer. I shook my head in confusion and wandered to the lounge to try to clear my head. Meg came with me, making coffee and muttering, "Quite a crazy night, eh?" "Yeah. Meg, is it just me? Or was that third man also different from the other two we saw tonight?" I asked. She shrugged, but I could tell it bothered her too. She was just simply too scared to even admit it. But I had to know. I went to the security room where we kept the video feed and rewound it back to the moment that mattered. 3:47. The exterior camera caught the sight of the second man leaving. That was at the exact same time that the other man was hit by the car on the highway at 3:30, is the exact time of the first homeless man arriving. And sure enough, after comparing the two timestamps, I was able to confirm that the two men resembled each other down to the very smallest of details. I was trying to figure out how that was possible when I heard the shatter of glass. Meg was standing by the door. Coffee spilt all across our tile. There in the door was the same man that we had just proclaimed dead, and this one looked just as exact double as well, except for different scarring and a different tattoo on his arm. This one resembled a 3. He was a bit more aware and less nervous than the others as he struggled to talk, and then gestured towards his mouth. It looked like someone had deliberately made incisions in his tongue to prevent him from speaking clearly. The man looked scared and wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible as he tried to leave. Hold on, we're here to help you," my nurse said as she tried to help the man sit back down. Abruptly, he started to spew up little bits of blood on her neck and upper body. Meg gasped a little and let go as the stranger kept coughing up more and more blood on the floor. "Get some fluids and an IV going," I told the paramedics that were still hanging about. They looked as confused and as frightened as the rest of us. Meg then started to choke and pointed towards her airway. Was she having an allergic reaction to this man's blood? I rushed to grab an EpiPen for her as the man started shaking and going into cardiac arrest. There wasn't enough of us to save them both, so I made a judgment call. I focused my attention on Meg, trying to save her as I heard the man struggle to breathe and then expire. But the Epi didn't really make a difference for my nurse. She died about the same time as him. The paramedics stepped back, and I looked at the other stranger they had brought about an hour earlier, suddenly making the connection. "Run blood samples on them," I instructed as I tried to determine what had made Megan die. The paramedics were a bit nervous to handle the task, but they did as they were told. "Doc, what the hell?" the second man said as he looked towards my nurse and saw something beginning to cover her skin. I stopped what I was doing and watched as the strange layer of red and dark ooze slid over my nurse's body. It was covering her in a cocoon faster than we could even stop it from happening. "Get these bodies over to the main hospital. We need to perform an autopsy on them," I told the paramedics. The two men were nervous to even touch the identical bodies, but complied and left as quickly as they could. I watched the strange substance cover Meg's body until I couldn't even see her face anymore. Then it slowly began to disappear, to inject itself into her body until it began to undergo a metamorphosis. I stepped away from where she lay to call the hospital and ask if the paramedics made it. Joy called again, worried about Officer Dillon. He still had never returned, and now the paramedics were missing. I suddenly felt very, very alone in the small room. I walked slowly back towards where Meg lay to confirm my suspicions. Her body was gone, the strange ooze shedding from her body like a second skin, and in her place, the familiar face of the stranger. I ran from that ER before I found out if this bizarre corpse would reanimate itself and reported everything I had seen to the police as soon as I could get away. They never did find the police officer or the paramedics that I sent away, and the security tapes at the ER were all conveniently erased by the time they made it there.